And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we are talking about the likelihood and if it is possible that the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors would do a sign and trade that would swap Josh Giddey for Jonathan Kuminga. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Monis Bazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. So if you have not got a chance to see this or hear about this, we are talking about a report from Jake L. Fischer that he did yesterday. And so this was during his Bleacher live report, and you can find this on Bleacher Report, their YouTube page, I believe. And at the 12-minute mark, that's where you're going to start to see the information that pertains to the Chicago Bulls. And so within that segment, he's talking about Jonathan Kuminga, and he's also talking about Josh Giddey. We talked about this yesterday, about how he was talking about how Golden State, along with other teams, are interested in Josh Giddey. And so one of the things that I did not talk about is he does mention a sign and trade between the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors that would potentially maybe swap Josh Giddey for Jonathan Kuminga. And so if you guys want to read about this, you can go over to Bleacher Nation. And again, this is not shedding light on anything that we didn't talk about yesterday, but I like this because it does have the excerpt and exactly what he said at that moment, and then just talking about a possible sign and trade between the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors here. And so this is what is said, and then we're going to go ahead and go from there. So it says that Josh Giddey is someone who is certainly flirting with and threatening the idea of taking the qualifying offer himself. I can report I can't name more teams than I would like to, but I can report that there have been multiple teams who have reached out to Josh Giddey's representatives about having interest in Josh Giddey. Golden State is one of them. Golden State would be interested, depending on how the machinations would go, in some type of Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade, to my understanding. All right, guys. And so I just wanted to go ahead and just look at that last line there where he's talking about, whatever the machinations would be between a Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade here. And so, is it likely that there could be a deal that would happen between these two teams? And so I don't think that it's necessarily likely that this is going to happen. I do think that it is possible. Anything's possible. I think that any trade or anything like that is definitely possible, but I don't see that this is going to be likely. And so point number one as to why I do not think that this is going to be likely is just going a little bit further in the video. Jake L. Fischer does talk about the fact that the Chicago Bulls are a very tough team to read, and not many teams really want to talk that talk with them when it comes down to trade talk, and especially when it comes down to Josh Giddey, because they've made it clear that they do want Josh Giddey with this team. And so right there, that just lets you know that, look, a sign and trade is probably going to be difficult to execute here to get Josh Giddey. And then, the next part about this is that really the Chicago Bulls, I think, hold all the cards here, because in a sign and trade, even if Josh Giddey wants to get a sign and trade done, the Chicago Bulls don't have to get involved and play into that game. I mean, they could say, no, we're not doing a sign and trade. So it doesn't matter how much you say you want to be sign and trade. It just would not happen. And so I think that we see really a good example of that with what is going on with Jonathan Kuminga, because there's several reports out there that, suggest that he is definitely exploring a sign and trade. But if Golden State doesn't want to get involved in a sign and trade, it just doesn't matter. Even if you do find some teams that want it, which there have been reports that there are teams that have been interested, but Golden State just didn't like the offer and just didn't even want to entertain it. So with the Chicago Bulls, the Golden State Warriors, it's possible, but not likely here. But I do find it interesting that when you look at the links between the two players, this is something that Jake L. Fischer talked about yesterday, is that the Golden State would have wanted to take Josh Giddey had he fallen in the draft versus Jonathan Kuminga there, which fell to them. And then also to the fact that they are still interested into him. I think that that's interesting. I do think that for them, just looking at it from Golden State's side, if this were something to get done, Golden State could look at this and say, okay, they have a piece for the future once they decide to go ahead and perhaps pivot off of Steph Curry and all those guys like that, with whatever window that they have. And so, I think that that's probably the move there. How that fits ultimately with their team, not sure. Don't necessarily cover the Golden State Warriors. In fact, I don't. I see them from afar. And so, I'm just thinking about what it would look like for them. And then for the Bulls, I think that with Jonathan Kuminga, if he were to come over, I think that he would be a decent fit. I don't know if he would necessarily be a terrific fit, because with Jonathan Kuminga, I think one of the things with him that you wonder about is, can he be a bit better off ball? Because I think right now, for him to take a step forward, I think he is going to want the ball in his hands. And I also think for Jonathan Kuminga, he needs probably, I think, a natural point guard that is just looking to pass first. I think that that is probably the thing with Jonathan Kuminga. And so when you think about swapping the players, it would actually kind of hurt, I think, in a sense, because with Jonathan Kuminga and me saying that he needs that true point guard, I think like a guy like Trey Jones would be okay for him, but I think a guy like Josh Giddey would be great for him. And so I think that that is one of the things where I'd question that. And then on top of that, when you look at it like this, if you go with Jonathan Kuminga and you were to ship off Josh Giddey, then you have to think about it like this. From a forward standpoint, you are going to have Modest Buzelis, who I think is going to take a step forward. And I think that he is going to command some more usage this year. I really do. And then on top of that, you still would have some of your younger forwards, counting that there's no major roster haul in a possible sign and trade if this were to happen. But you still would have Julian Phillips. You still have Jalen Smith. You possibly still have Dalen Terry there. And then you have a player that you're still developing here in Noah Asingay. And so, you'd have to wonder, would the Bulls be willing to build around those forwards? Is that going to be enough, with what they would do? And then also, too, they would have to try to figure out still what they are going to do from a guard situation, because yes, you could kick, Kobe White into the lead guard role, I guess. Or you could actually go ahead and you could maybe go with Ayo Dosunmu, and that's counting that either of these players are not included in a possible sign and trade, because I do think that it is going to take some more pieces to get a sign and trade if this were something that they were serious about. But to be clear, again, I don't see that this being a likely situation between the two teams, regardless of the interest between the two teams, because that is something that Jake L. Fischer had said. He said that the Bulls had checked in on Jonathan Kuminga, but they were never aggressive. And then just going back to what he said with the Golden State Warriors, it seems like they've always liked Josh Giddey. And so regardless of them, liking the players, like, I still don't think that the likelihood's going to be there, especially with the Bulls and how much resistance that you would have to get through. And I think that the Golden State Warriors, they're definitely going to want something too, because I think that when you do make a move to get a guy like Josh Giddey and going back to just setting it up for the future, they're going to want probably something else that is going to help them pivot or give them some insurance policy with this deal. And so, that's why I'm like, I'm very questionable with this. But I think that the bottom line here is this, that if Josh Giddey were to be moved away from the Chicago Bulls, it would most certainly have to be a sign and trade. The Bulls would have to want to do this. And I think that just really what it's going to come down to, I think, is just that if it gets to that point where he wants to do a sign and trade, and the Bulls probably are not going to want to do that, I think that they are just not going to. I think that you would see Josh Giddey go with the qualifying offer. And then after that year in the qualifying offer, I could see where he could probably want to go elsewhere with that, because, I think at that point, when you're talking about the qualifying offer, which I think is probably going to happen to Jonathan Kuminga at this point too, like, I just think that maybe the relationship between the clubs, maybe it's a bit damaged there, especially when you look at Jonathan Kuminga. Can you imagine what he's probably thinking if he did see this report and he's seeing that, your team would have wanted to take this player versus you, had you not fallen in the draft. All right. And then also, too, we already hear him talking about how he wants his, money and stuff like that. And I believe with them talking about player options and all this stuff like that, so I think that that definitely would be something that could really, probably burn that relationship. And then when you look at Josh Giddey in that situation with him, man, it's all about confidence here. And so, if you're going and then you dangle him like this in a sign and trade, I couldn't see that this would be something that would work out for him as far as being comfortable with the organization. In fact, I think that for him, if he gets to the point of the qualifying offer, I don't know if he comes back to the Chicago Bulls. I just think that he would be to the point where if he goes and especially balls out, other teams are going to be there for him. Like, I just think that he would probably explore that. But bottom line is, when you look at this and you're hearing that other teams are interested or whatnot, the key out of this, and I didn't mention this yesterday, is that nobody has made a sign, like not a sign and trade, but an offer to Josh Giddey. And it is because they don't have the cap space. And if they are to go after Josh Giddey, it most certainly would be a sign and trade. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, do you think that the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors would get a sign and trade that would swap these two players? Do you think that Josh Giddey will get a long-term deal with the Chicago Bulls? Do you think that he ends up on the qualifying offer? I'd love to hear your thoughts there. And also, too, just for the heck of it, what do you guys think here with Jonathan Kuminga? Does he find his way to Chicago, or does he end up with a qualifying offer or elsewhere? So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there. And as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.